Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he stepped off the transport ship. The air on planet Kepler 442b felt thick and warm. Two bright suns hung in the orange sky above him. He grabbed his backpack and followed the other students toward their camp. The Galactic Academy had sent 37 students to this planet for their final test. Jake was the only human in the group. The rest came from different alien worlds across the galaxy. Some looked like tall blue crystals that walked on legs. Others had 4 arms made of metal and gears. A few floated in clear suits filled with gas. Professor Zethkar stood waiting for them near a cliff edge. He was one of the crystal people called Altarians. His body caught the sunlight and threw it back in bright colors. When he spoke, a small device changed his musical sounds into words Jake could understand. "Students, look at this canyon," the professor said. He pointed to a huge crack in the ground that stretched as far as Jake could see. "This is your final test. You must cross this gap and bring back plant samples from the other side. You have 1 week to figure out how to do it." Jake walked to the edge and looked down. The canyon was deep and wide. He could barely see the bottom through the shadows. The other side looked like it was at least 12 kilometers away. The gap was too wide to jump and too deep to climb down and back up. The other students started talking right away. The crystal people made singing sounds to each other. The metal robot students clicked and beeped. The gas people in suits made lights flash on their containers. Jake listened but could not understand most of what they said. A tall student with a long head walked over to Jake. This was one of the Vexani people who could read minds. "Hello, human Jake Morrison. I am Talvera. What are your first thoughts about crossing this canyon?" Jake looked at the canyon again. "It's wide and deep. We need to find a way across that won't kill us." Talvera's big eyes blinked slowly. "Your mind is very quiet. Most species think very loudly about problems. You just observe. Thinking too hard too fast makes mistakes," Jake said. "Better to look first, then think." More students came over to meet Jake. A robot student named Boltzik extended one of his 4 metal arms for a handshake. "Human engineering is known throughout the galaxy. What bridge design will you propose?" "Don't know yet," Jake said. "Need to study the problem first." A student covered in math symbols called Theorem X spoke up. "The calculations for spanning 12 kilometers require advanced materials we do not possess. The load factors alone present 847 variables to consider." Jake nodded but said nothing. He was not good with big numbers like that. Earth schools taught him basic math and how to build things with his hands. These alien students seemed much smarter than him. The professor called for attention. "You may work alone or in teams. Use any materials you find here or in your supply packs. Remember, you must bring back living plant samples from the other side. The plants you need only grow on that far cliff." Jake set up his small tent away from the main group. The alien students formed big circles and started planning right away. He could hear them talking late into the night. Some drew pictures in the dirt, others built small models with sticks and rocks. The crystal students sang complex songs to each other. Jake learned that this was how they shared ideas. The robot students connected cables between their heads to think together. The gas people made their lights flash in patterns that meant different things. Jake sat by himself and ate dinner from a can. He watched the canyon as the suns went down. The wind blew across the gap and made a low humming sound. Birds flew back and forth between the cliffs. Some were very large with wide wings. On the second day, the alien students were still planning. They had filled notebooks with drawings and numbers. Some groups argued about which plan was best. Others tried to combine their ideas into bigger plans. Talvera came to sit with Jake during lunch. "The other students wonder why you do not join our planning sessions." "I'm learning by watching," Jake said. "You all know things I don't. Math and science and technology from advanced worlds. Earth is still pretty new to space travel. But humans have a reputation for solving hard problems in simple ways." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes simple is better than complex, but I need to understand what we're really trying to do first." That afternoon, Jake walked along the cliff edge for several kilometers. He studied the rock, the plants, and how the wind moved. He found places where the cliff was stronger and places where it looked weak. He collected some fallen branches and tested how strong they were. The alien students watched him walk, but did not follow. They were too busy with their planning. By evening, Jake had walked the entire length of their camp area. He made notes in a small book about what he saw. On the third day, the alien group started testing small models of their ideas. The crystal, students tried to make a bridge out of light and sound. The robot students built tiny machines that could maybe carry things across the gap. The math students drew plans for flying machines. Jake spent the day looking at the supplies everyone had brought. There were ropes for climbing mountains, metal pieces for fixing equipment, tools for digging and cutting, fabric for making shelters. Each student had brought different things from their home worlds. That night, Jake lay in his tent and thought about everything he had seen. The canyon was wide but not impossible. The wind was strong but steady. The rocks on both sides looked solid. The other students were all very smart, but they were trying to make perfect solutions. Jake's grandfather had been a builder back on Earth. He always said that the best bridge was the one that got you across safely, not the one that looked the prettiest or used the most advanced technology. Sometimes the old ways worked better than the new ways. As Jake fell asleep, he started to form a plan. It would not be fancy or use advanced science, but it might just work. The fourth day began with excited voices from the alien camps. Jake woke up to hear the crystal students singing their ideas in harmony. The robot students were clicking and beeping as they shared data through their cable connections. Even the quiet gas people were flashing lights faster than usual. Jake made coffee over his small camp stove and listened to the universal translator device Professor Zethkar had given each student. The device turned all the different alien languages into words he could understand. The mind bridge requires exactly 12 Vexani students working together, Talavera was explaining to a mixed group. We can link our thoughts and create a mental pathway across the canyon. The bridge will be made of pure psychic energy. A robot student named Circuit Mag extended his arms to show a hologram. Impossible. Psychic energy cannot support physical weight. Our mechanical solution is better. We will build micro-robots that can carry materials across piece by piece and construct a metal bridge. Both plans ignore the mathematical realities, said Theoremix, the student covered in number symbols. I have calculated 15,847 different bridge designs. Only 3 have probability of success above 0. All 3 require materials not available on this planet. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the debates grow more intense. More students joined each group and the arguments got louder. The crystal students sang faster and brighter. The robot students' clicking sounds became rapid-fire bursts of data. The gas people's lights flashed in angry red patterns. By midday, the camp had split into 6 major groups. The Vexani mind readers formed one team. The robot Thekron students made another. The mathematical Zenthorian students worked alone in pairs. The crystal Altarian students sang in one large choir. The gas nebula dwellers floated together in their own corner. Several smaller groups tried to mix different species together. Jake walked between the groups, listening to their plans. Each group believed their solution was the only correct one. Each group could explain why all the other plans would fail. The Vexani students sat in a circle with their eyes closed. Talavera spoke for the group. We are testing the mental bridge now. If we can connect our minds across small distances, we can stretch the connection across the canyon. The human student could walk across on a bridge made of thoughts. Dangerous and unproven, said Circuit Mag. Mental energy is not reliable. Our micro-robots are being programmed now. They will carry carbon fiber cables across the canyon. The cables will support a mechanical walkway. Where will you get carbon fiber cables? Asked Jake. Circuit Mag's lights dimmed slightly. We are still solving that problem. Perhaps we can break down non-essential equipment and reform the materials. Jake nodded and moved to the next group. The mathematical students had covered the ground with equations and diagrams. Theoremix looked up from a complex drawing. Human Jake Morrison, please examine our calculations. We have designed an anti-gravity platform that can float across the canyon. The mathematics are perfect. Jake looked at the drawings. They showed a floating disk with mathematical symbols around the edges. How do you make it float? With anti-gravity fields generated by quantum mathematics. Do you know how to build quantum mathematics? Theoremix paused. His number symbols shifted to different patterns. We know the theory. The practical construction requires materials and tools we do not possess. The gas students were having their own problems. Their leader, a being called Mist Walker, spoke through a voice box on his suit. We can wait for the seasonal atmospheric changes. In 8 months, the air currents will be strong enough to carry us across in our protective suits. The assignment is due in 4 days, Jake pointed out. Yes, this presents a timing problem we have not yet solved. Jake spent the afternoon moving between groups. Each team was working hard on their solution. The Crystal students were trying to grow a bridge out of living light. The Altarian Professor Zethkar watched their attempts with interest, but their light bridge kept fading after a few meters. The robot students had started taking apart some of their equipment. They were trying to build the micro-robots that would carry materials across. But their robots were too small to carry enough weight, and too few to build a bridge quickly. The mathematical students kept finding new problems with their calculations. Every time they solved one equation, they discovered 2 more problems. Their floating platform existed perfectly on paper, but nowhere else. By evening, frustration was growing in all the camps. Students who had been working together all day were starting to argue. The universal translators were getting overloaded, trying to keep up with heated discussions in multiple alien languages. Professor Zethkar called everyone together as the 2 suns began to set. His crystal body had turned a deep blue color that Jake had learned meant the professor was concerned. Students, you have 3 days remaining. I have observed your efforts today. Each group has developed interesting theoretical solutions. However, I must remind you that this is a practical assignment. You must physically cross the canyon and return with plant samples. Talavera raised her hand. Professor, what if crossing is impossible with our available resources? Then you will fail the assignment and need to repeat this course next year. This news caused more arguments among the students. Some groups blamed other groups for not sharing resources. Others insisted their plan would work if they had more time. A few students suggested giving up and accepting failure. Jake returned to his tent as the alien students continued debating around their camp lights. He could hear them talking and arguing late into the night. Some were making new plans. Others were trying to combine different ideas into one super plan. The Vexani students were attempting to read each other's minds from greater distances. Jake could hear them concentrating very hard, with occasional frustrated sighs when their mental bridges collapsed. The robot students were welding and building through the night. Sparks flew from their work area as they tried to construct larger robots that could carry more weight. The mathematical students were redoing all their calculations. Jake could see the light from their work area, where they covered more ground, with new equations and theories. Jake lay in his sleeping bag and listened to all the activity around him. These students were all much smarter than him. They knew advanced science and mathematics that Earth had not yet discovered. They could do things with their minds and bodies that humans could only dream about. But they were all trying to solve the wrong problem. They were trying to build the perfect bridge that would amaze their professors and show off their species' greatest abilities. They were competing with each other to have the most advanced solution. Jake was just trying to get across a canyon. He did not need to impress anyone or prove how smart humans were. He just needed to walk from one side to the other, collect some plants, and walk back. As he fell asleep, Jake thought about his grandfather's old stories about building bridges on Earth. Before humans had advanced technology, they had built bridges out of wood and rope and stone. Those bridges were not fancy, but they worked. They got people across rivers and valleys safely. Maybe that was what this assignment really needed. Not the most advanced bridge possible, but just a bridge that worked. The 5th night was darker than the previous ones. Heavy clouds covered both suns, and most of the alien students had gone to sleep after another long day of failed experiments. Jake lay in his tent listening to the wind blow across the canyon. The steady humming sound gave him an idea about how strong and constant the wind was. When he was sure everyone else was asleep, Jake quietly left his tent. He had spent the day gathering materials while the other students worked on their complex plans. Now it was time to build something simple that would actually work. Jake started with the ropes. Every student had brought climbing rope for the field expedition. Most of the ropes were sitting unused while the students tried to build advanced technology bridges. Jake had asked to borrow rope from several students during the day. They had agreed, thinking he was planning some kind of human experiment. Ropes were made of strong synthetic materials that could hold much more weight than old-fashioned rope from Earth. Jake tested each rope by tying it to rocks and pulling as hard as he could. The ropes were strong enough to hold several people at once. Next, Jake gathered the wooden poles and metal brackets he had collected. The camp had many temporary shelters and equipment stands. Students had used metal brackets to hold scientific instruments and wooden poles to support their tents. Jake had quietly collected extras that were not being used. Jake's plan was simple. He would build a suspension bridge, using the ropes as cables and the wooden poles as supports. This was not advanced alien technology. This was basic human engineering that had been used on Earth for hundreds of years, but it would work. Jake started by finding the strongest points on both sides of the canyon. During his walks earlier in the week, he had tested different rocks and cliff edges. He found solid stone formations that could support the weight of bridge cables without breaking. Working quietly in the darkness, Jake tied the main support ropes to these anchor points. He used knots his grandfather had taught him for construction work. These were not fancy mathematical knots designed by computers. They were simple, strong knots that humans had used for thousands of years. The hardest part was getting the first rope across the canyon. Jake tied one end securely to his anchor point, then tied the other end to a large rock. He threw the rock as hard as he could across the canyon. It took many tries in the darkness, but finally the rock landed on the other side and caught between some stones. Jake tested the rope bridge by pulling on it hard. It stretched across the canyon like a tight cable. The rope was strong enough to hold weight but too thin to walk on safely. He needed to add more support. Working through the night, Jake added more ropes parallel to the first one. He used wooden poles to create a simple walkway between the support cables. The metal brackets helped connect the wooden pieces together. Everything was held in place with more rope and knots. Jake tested each section as he built it. He put his full weight on the wooden walkway to make sure it would not break. He checked every knot twice to make sure it was tied correctly. He pushed and pulled on the metal brackets to make sure they were secure. By the time the two suns started to rise, Jake had built a rope and wood bridge that stretched across the entire canyon. It was not beautiful or high-tech. It swayed in the wind and creaked when weight was put on it, but it was solid and safe. Jake tested the bridge by walking across it slowly. The bridge moved under his feet, but it held his weight easily. The wooden walkway was wide enough to walk on comfortably. The rope handholds on both sides made it feel secure. Once Jake was sure the bridge was safe, he walked across to the other side of the canyon. The alien students were looking for specific plant samples that only grew on the far cliff. Jake found the plants easily and collected samples in his specimen containers. The plants were strange-looking with purple leaves and blue stems. They grew in cracks in the rock where water seeped out of the cliff face. Jake was careful to take samples without killing the plants. He also took pictures and made notes about where he found them. Jake walked back across his bridge carrying the plant samples. The bridge swayed more with the extra weight, but it remained solid and safe. He was back on the original side of the canyon just as the alien students started waking up. Jake made coffee and breakfast while he waited for the others to discover his bridge. He could hear surprised voices and strange alien sounds coming from the camp as students left their tents and saw the rope bridge spanning the canyon. Circuit Mag was the first to approach Jake's camp area. The robot student's optical sensors were focused on the bridge. His metal arms were extended as he scanned the structure. "Human Jake Morrison, did you construct this bridge during the night period?" "Yes," Jake said, offering Circuit Mag a cup of coffee. "Want to try some Earth caffeine?" "I do not consume liquids." "How did you calculate the load distribution for a 12-kilometer span?" "I didn't calculate anything. I just built it strong enough to hold my weight plus some extra for safety." More students gathered around Jake's camp. Talvera was trying to read his mind, but Jake's thoughts were calm and simple. He was just proud that his plan had worked. Theoremix arrived with several other mathematical students. They were all looking at the bridge with confusion. Their number symbols were shifting rapidly as they tried to understand what they were seeing. "This structure defies our calculations," Theoremix said. "The materials should not support the span length. The wind load should cause catastrophic oscillation. The connection points should fail under stress." "But it works," Jake said simply. "Anyone want to walk across and get their plant samples?" Professor Zethkar approached the group. His crystal body was cycling through multiple colors, which Jake had learned meant the professor was experiencing strong emotions. The professor walked to the bridge and examined the anchor points and construction. "Student Morrison, this is remarkable practical engineering. You have solved the assignment using only basic materials and simple construction techniques. My grandfather always said the best solution is the one that gets the job done," Jake replied. The alien students spent the morning studying Jake's bridge. They measured the ropes, examined the knots, and tested the wooden walkway. Some of them walked across carefully to collect their own plant samples. Others were afraid to trust such a simple-looking structure. Jake sat in his camp chair, drinking coffee and watching the alien students cross his bridge. He had solved the problem that had stumped some of the galaxy's smartest species. He had done it using basic human engineering and common sense. The bridge was not perfect. It swayed in the wind and creaked under weight. It would not last forever, or carry heavy vehicles. But it did exactly what it needed to do. It got students safely across the canyon and back. As more students successfully crossed the bridge, Jake felt satisfied with his work. Sometimes the simple solution really was the best solution. Word about Jake's bridge spread quickly through the alien student camp. By midday, students from species across the galaxy were gathering around the canyon edge to stare at the simple rope and wood structure that had solved their impossible problem. Talvera stood at the bridge entrance, her large head tilted in confusion. As a Vexani mind reader, she was used to detecting complex thought patterns from other species. But Jake's mental activity during the bridge construction had been almost invisible to her psychic abilities. "I monitored the humans' thoughts throughout the night," she told the gathered crowd. "There were no complex calculations, no advanced engineering theories, no stress analysis computations. His mind was focused on simple tasks like tying knots and testing strength." Circuit Mag extended his scanning arms toward the bridge supports. His optical sensors ran detailed analysis on every joint and connection point. The results made no sense according to his programming. "The load-bearing specifications exceed theoretical maximums for these materials," he announced to the other robot students. "The bridge should collapse under its own weight, yet it supports the mass of multiple students safely." 3 more robot students connected their processing cables together to share computational power. They analyzed the bridge from every angle, measuring wind resistance, calculating stress points, and testing material fatigue. Their combined artificial intelligence could not explain how the bridge worked. "Human engineering appears to violate several laws of structural mechanics," said their leader, an advanced robot called Datacore. "This presents a significant gap in our understanding of practical construction." The mathematical students were having even more trouble accepting the bridge. Theoremix had spent hours covering the ground with new equations, trying to prove that Jake's bridge was impossible. Every calculation showed the structure should fail immediately. "The human used no mathematics whatsoever," Theoremix said to his fellow Xanthorian students. "No stress analysis, no wind load calculations, no material science equations. Yet the bridge functions perfectly. This contradicts everything we know about engineering." Another math student called Logic Prime was working on a different approach. "Perhaps humans possess an intuitive understanding of physics that bypasses conscious calculation. They may process structural engineering at a subconscious level. That would require evolutionary adaptation to engineering problems," replied Theoremix. "Highly improbable for a species that developed technology only recently." The crystal students were studying the bridge from an artistic perspective. As Altarians, they were used to creating beautiful structures that combined function with aesthetic perfection. Jake's bridge was purely functional with no decorative elements at all. Professor Zethkar stood with his students, his crystal body shifting through thoughtful blue and green colors. The human student has achieved maximum function with minimum complexity. This represents a completely different design philosophy from our cultural approaches. But Professor, said one of his students, the bridge is not beautiful. It has no artistic merit, no cultural significance, no technological advancement. How can such a crude structure be considered good engineering? Because it works, the professor replied simply. Perhaps we have been confusing complexity with quality. The gas students in their protective suits were also puzzled by Jake's approach. As nebula dwellers, they were used to thinking in terms of fluid dynamics and atmospheric currents. Their own proposed solution had involved waiting months for seasonal wind changes. Mistwalker floated near the bridge, studying how it moved in the wind. The human student incorporated wind movement into his design instead of fighting against it. The bridge sways but does not break. This shows understanding of environmental integration. Jake sat in his camp chair watching all the alien students examine his work. Some of them were taking detailed measurements and photos. Others were arguing about the theoretical implications. A few were simply walking back and forth across the bridge, collecting their required plant samples. Talvera approached Jake with several other Vexani students. Their large eyes were focused on him with intense curiosity. Human Jake Morrison, we must understand your thought process during bridge construction. Will you permit a deeper mental scan? You can try, Jake said, but I don't think you'll find anything complicated. I just built a bridge the way my grandfather taught me. Talvera placed her elongated fingers on Jake's forehead. The other Vexani students formed a circle around them, linking their minds together to share the mental scan. Jake felt a slight tingling sensation as the aliens examined his thoughts. After several minutes, Talvera stepped back with a puzzled expression. The other Vexani students were making confused mental sounds. Your thinking pattern is unlike any we have encountered, Talvera said. Instead of analyzing problems theoretically, you observe them practically. Instead of calculating perfect solutions, you build working solutions. Your mind skips over complex theory and goes directly to functional results. Circuit Mag rolled over on his mechanical treads. This suggests humans possess a form of intelligence optimized for practical problem-solving rather than theoretical analysis. That's probably right, Jake agreed. Earth is a tough planet. Things that don't work get you killed pretty fast. We learn to build things that work first and worry about making them perfect later. More students were crossing the bridge now. Even some who had been afraid at first were willing to try it after seeing others cross safely. The bridge swayed and creaked under their weight, but it held firm. Jake noticed that many of the alien students were more comfortable with his bridge after they had walked across it themselves. The physical experience of using the bridge helped them understand it better than all their theoretical analysis. Professor Zethkar called for the attention of all students. His crystal body had shifted to a bright, official color that meant he was making an important announcement. Students, you have 3 days remaining in this assignment. However, Student Morrison has demonstrated that the crossing problem is solved. All students may now use his bridge to collect the required plant samples and complete the assignment. This announcement caused excited chatter among all the alien groups. Students who had been working on failed solutions for days could now finish their assignment in a few hours. But many of the alien students seemed more interested in studying Jake's bridge than in collecting plants. They continued to measure and analyze and debate the construction methods. Some were starting to build small models of suspension bridges using sticks and string. Jake was amazed to see genius-level alien students trying to copy his simple human engineering. Species that could travel between stars and manipulate matter with their minds were fascinated by rope knots and wooden boards. It is remarkable, Professor Zethkar said to Jake privately. These students represent the finest minds from dozens of advanced civilizations. Yet none of them thought to build a simple working bridge. They were all trying to create perfect bridges that showcase their species' greatest achievements. Sometimes you don't need perfect, Jake said. Sometimes you just need good enough to get the job done. As the day continued, more students successfully crossed Jake's bridge and returned with their plant samples. The assignment that had seemed impossible was now routine. But the real lesson was just beginning to sink in for the alien students. They had been so focused on demonstrating their intelligence that they had forgotten to solve the actual problem. The human student had ignored the competition and just built something that worked. This was a completely new way of thinking for most of them. Jake spent the evening answering questions about human engineering and construction methods. The alien students were eager to learn about practical problem-solving techniques. They wanted to understand how humans could find simple solutions to complex problems. As night fell and the camp settled down, Jake could hear the alien students talking excitedly about what they had learned. Some were already planning to study human engineering methods when they returned to their homeworlds. Jake smiled as he went to sleep. His simple bridge had not only solved the assignment, but had also taught some of the galaxy's smartest species a valuable lesson about the difference between being clever and being effective. 3 days later, all the students had completed their assignments. Plant samples sat in carefully labeled containers, ready for transport back to the Galactic Academy. But nobody was talking about the plants anymore. Everyone was talking about Jake's bridge. Professor Zethkar stood before the assembled students for their final evaluation. His crystal body glowed with warm, golden light that indicated satisfaction and pride. Behind him, Jake's rope bridge still swayed gently in the wind, as functional as the day he built it. "This expedition has taught us something unexpected," the professor began. "We came here to study alien plant life. Instead, we have learned about different approaches to problem solving." Jake sat with the other students, still amazed by how much attention his simple bridge had received. Alien scientists from across the galaxy had been sending messages to the Academy, requesting detailed information about human construction methods. "Student Morrison," Professor Zethkar continued, "your bridge has become the subject of 17 research papers, 43 engineering studies, and 6 requests for diplomatic contact with Earth. The Galactic Engineering Council wants to establish a permanent research exchange with human universities." Jake felt his face turn red with embarrassment. "I just built a bridge, Professor. It's not that complicated." Talvera stood up from the group of Vexani students. Over the past few days, she had become fascinated with human thinking patterns. "That is exactly what makes it remarkable, Jake Morrison. You solved a complex problem with a simple solution. Most species in the galaxy have forgotten how to do that." Circuit Mag rolled forward on his mechanical treads. The robot student had spent days analyzing Jake's bridge and comparing it to advanced Thekron engineering projects. "Our species builds bridges that last for thousands of years and carry massive cargo ships, but we require 2 years of planning and resources from entire solar systems. You built a working bridge in one night with materials you found at the campsite. Both approaches have value," Jake said. "You need permanent bridges for important things. I just needed to get across a canyon for a school assignment." Theramix approached with several mathematical students behind him. The Zenthorian's number, symbols were shifting in patterns that Jake had learned meant deep thought and confusion. "Human Jake Morrison, we have been studying your construction methods for 3 days. We cannot find any mathematical basis for your design decisions. How did you know the bridge would support the required weight?" Jake thought for a moment. "I tested everything as I built it. If something felt weak, I made it stronger. If a knot looked wrong, I retied it. I kept building until it felt right." "But how did you quantify felt right without mathematical analysis?" "I don't know. I just knew." The mathematical students exchanged confused glances. Their entire civilization was based on precise calculations and logical proofs. The idea of building something based on intuition and experience was completely foreign to them. Professor Zethkar gestured toward the bridge. "Students, this expedition has revealed something important about intelligence and problem solving. There are different types of knowledge, and different ways of applying that knowledge." He pointed to the various alien student groups. The Vexani approach problems through mental collaboration and psychic analysis. The Thekron use computational power and technological solutions. The Zenthorians rely on mathematical proofs and logical frameworks. The Altarians create solutions that combine function with artistic beauty. The nebula dwellers work with environmental adaptation and atmospheric manipulation. The professor's crystal body shifted to a teaching color that meant he was making an important point. But humans appear to use a form of practical intelligence that bypasses theoretical analysis. They test ideas directly through physical experimentation and sensory feedback. Jake listened as the professor explained human thinking to the alien students. It was strange to hear his own thought processes described as if they were some kind of advanced alien technology. This suggests, the professor continued, that intelligence itself may be more diverse than we previously understood. Each species has evolved different ways of understanding and manipulating their environment. Humans developed an approach optimized for immediate practical results. A new voice spoke from the back of the group. Jake turned to see Admiral Stonewing, a high-ranking officer from the Galactic Defense Force who had arrived that morning to observe the final evaluation. Professor Zethkar is correct, the Admiral said. We have been studying human military tactics and engineering for several years. Humans consistently find working solutions to problems that leave our best strategists confused. They adapt quickly to new situations and improvise effective responses with limited resources. Admiral Stonewing walked over to examine Jake's bridge more closely. This bridge is a perfect example. Our military engineers would have spent months developing specifications. For a canyon crossing, they would have required specialized equipment, detailed environmental analysis, and approval from multiple departments. A human soldier would have built this bridge in one night and been crossing enemy territory by morning. Jake felt uncomfortable, being discussed as if he represented all of humanity. I'm just one person. Not all humans think the same way. But you do share common cultural and educational experiences, Talvera pointed out. Your grandfather taught you construction methods. Your schools emphasized practical skills. Your planet's difficult environment rewarded functional solutions over theoretical perfection. Mistwalker floated forward in his protective suit. The human approach may be valuable for our species to study. We often become trapped in analysis when action would be more effective. Over the next few hours, Jake found himself answering questions about human education, culture, and problem-solving methods. The alien students wanted to understand how Earth had produced a species that thought so differently from the rest of the galaxy. Jake told them about human history, about learning through trial and error, about building things with their hands from childhood. He explained how humans had always faced dangerous environments and limited resources, forcing them to find solutions that worked immediately. So humans developed intelligence through survival pressure rather than academic advancement. Theoremix observed. This explains the focus on practical results over theoretical elegance. Maybe, Jake said. But I think every species probably has their own kind of intelligence. You all taught me things I never could have figured out on my own. As the day ended and the students prepared to return to their transport ship, Professor Zethkar made one final announcement. The Galactic Academy has decided to establish a new research program. We will be studying different forms of intelligence and problem-solving across all known species. Student Morrison, we would like you to be the first human instructor in this program. Jake was surprised by the offer. I'm not qualified to teach at a galactic university, Professor. I just finished my basic engineering degree. You are qualified to teach what we need to learn, the professor replied. How to find simple solutions to complex problems. How to build things that work without perfect theoretical understanding. How to act decisively when others are paralyzed by analysis. Jake looked at his rope bridge swaying in the wind. In a few days, other students would probably take it down, or it would wear out from weather exposure, but it had done its job. It had gotten everyone across the canyon safely and taught some important lessons along the way. I'll think about it, Jake said finally. As the transport ship prepared for departure, Jake took one last look at the canyon and his bridge. He had come to this planet expecting to learn about alien plants. Instead, he had taught alien students about human engineering and started a new field of research in galactic education. The bridge was still there, still working, still swaying in the wind. It was not beautiful or advanced or permanent, but it had solved the problem it was built to solve, and sometimes that was enough. Years later, when Jake became a famous teacher and engineer, he would often tell his students about the bridge on Kepler 442b. The bridge that proved sometimes the best solution was not the most complex one, but the one that simply worked. And somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Academy, detailed studies of that simple rope bridge continued to influence how different species approached problems and learned from each other. Jake's grandfather would have been proud.